Hello, my name is Tom Wickersham. I'm the events director here at Brookline Booksmith, and I'd like to thank you all for joining us tonight for Amir Aczel's Finding Zero and for supporting your local independent bookstore. Where do numbers come from? Taken for granted in our daily lives, the invention of numerals and the concept of zero is shrouded in mystery. In Finding Zero, Amir Aczel travels the world hunting for answers in a quest that takes him from India to the jungles of Cambodia and introduces him to everyone from politicians to smugglers. And now, please welcome Amir Aczel.
Thank you very much, Tom. This is my 20th book, and all the previous 19 were about other people. They're interesting people. Einstein and Fermat and Descartes, Mathematician, Cantor, but this one is about me. Or at least it's not really about me, but I had to write it in the first person, which was very unusual for me and took some getting used to. And the reason is because nobody wanted the book. So I had this idea of searching for the origin of the numerals for many years. In the book I describe how it was really a childhood dream, not this. It didn't go anywhere. I wrote a proposal for a book. That's what you always have to do. And the character for this book was so boring that no publisher would take it. His name is Georges Sedes, C-O-E, I forgot how to spell it, D-E-S, with a down accent, accent, not a grave, yeah, grave. A French scholar who led a very boring life. So publisher after publisher rejected the book, and I became very depressed for that and for other reasons, and I actually got ill, and I was in a hospital, and I had things like this coming out of my body. I had tubes coming out of my kidney and other places, and just as I was pretty much saying goodbye to this world, my wife was here, came over and said, you just got a grant from the Sloan Foundation to write this book you wanted about numerals. So then the problem was a doctor, because the doctor wouldn't remove the tube from my kidney. And he said, no, you need it. And I said, I'm going to Cambodia. At that time I knew it was Cambodia, not India. He said, no, you can't. And I said, yes, I'm going. He said, you'll die. I said, that's fine. I don't want to disappoint the Sloan Foundation. They believed in me after all these publishers didn't. I'm going to Cambodia. And he said, well, will you be near a hospital? And I said, well, there's one in Bangkok, which is, I don't know, 1,000 miles away. And he said, oh, okay. And after a lot of argument, he removed the tube, and I'm fine. I've been fine since then. So I think the moral of the story is that writing a book can cure you. So the book already did its job, as far as I'm concerned. So now I need to tell you what it's all about. And we have this first slide up there, and it says India. And I think if you meet people from India, they'll tell you, yeah, we invented zero, and we invented the numbers. And I met at a conference in Australia a very unusual person by the name of C.K. Raju, who claims that everything comes from India. Einstein actually didn't invent relativity, it comes from India. And the theorem of Euclid, the theorems of Euclid and the Pythagorean theorem, all these things, they come from India. He actually gave a lecture saying these things. The audience were pretty much about to throw rotten eggs at him. And it pretty much smashed all of Western civilizations because everything came from India. But it stuck in my mind, and when before I was in the hospital, 3 years before, I decided to go to India and search for the numerals, but mostly I went to India to meet him. And I took my wife with me, and we arrived in Delhi, and we're supposed to meet at 2 o'clock in a hotel in the center of Delhi. And we were sitting, both of us, in the lobby drinking tea for hours, and then at 4 o'clock he showed up. And then I realized that that's really the logic of the East, and very quickly I sort of understood that the East has a different logic than our logic. And I was actually more right than I thought at that point. So Raju came, and he had this big briefcase with lots of papers, but he wouldn't show them to me. He said, all the important papers are in my car, and my car is not here. But he said, and he started talking, I kid you not, again, Einstein took it all from the Indians. The zero, of course, comes from India. The numerals come from India. All the theorems that we know come from India. Physics comes from India. He talked like that for about an hour, and then he left. And that's why we went to India to meet him. So I had to start on my own, but I was lucky. So this is what India has. It has a lot of temples all over the place. Ancient temples and bazaars like these, and there are lots and lots of manuscripts all over the place. There are plaques and steles and all kinds of things. And in particular, there's a place that I knew about that had ancient numerals, and they had been lost to science. Nobody knew where they were anymore. If you go on Wikipedia, which I did just yesterday, that magic square is mentioned, but there's no picture of it. But I'll show you a picture of it because I rediscovered it. I had to take out a few slides because they're not appropriate for all audiences, but you can probably guess. So there are temples in this place called Khajuraho, and they get more and more explicit. If you look at this carefully, you'll see some of them that kind of hint at what's coming, but the real stuff I took out. So you can, it's all these statues. A place called Khajuraho, and some of them are very erotic and graphic. People go there mostly to see these statues. Not these, there are others. So, and there it is. It took a day searching. I pretty much had to ask anybody why. First of all, we don't really know why there are all these erotic statues and math. But that seems to be the way of the East. These are temples, and there's math. And this is, so I want to wait a few minutes with this slide, because if you're interested, you can figure out what these numerals are. They're very different from ours, and they're the progenitors of ours, but they're very different. And they're not what they look like. I can't remember which one is which. My wife figured it out within a few minutes. So the sum of this is called a regular 4x4 magic square, and the sum has to be 34. And I'm not a good enough mathematician to figure it out, but a good friend of ours figured it out within a short time and proved to me why it has to be 34. But the sum is 34. So if you know that all the sums are 34, you can figure out what these numerals are. These are, Wikipedia says it's 10th century. I don't know if it's 10th or 11th, so I left it as 11th, but it's either 10th or 11th century. It's very old, obviously, and they were able to do this kind of mathematics. So all the sums are 34. If you go this way, it's going to be 34, and the other full diagonal, and these, all the columns and all the rows, they all add up to 34. But there's more. These four will add to 34. And these four, and these four, and these four, and the central four. That's what's so beautiful about magic squares. They are magical. And I don't know why they put it. There are all kinds of erotic statues all around here. Here it is, just the picture itself. A Japanese mathematician found it in 1983, but he forgot where it was, and so I had to visit all the temples and see all the art there. There are about 20 of them, And this was really found in one of the, in the eastern group. There are several, two groups of temples. The main group is the western group. This is in the eastern group. Nobody goes there. Everybody goes to the western group. There are better temples there. There are only a few dogs where this is, and some children begging for money. Anyway, this is it. So I rediscovered it, and these I love the magic square, but I'm interested in the numerals. And if you can see, these are the Hindu numerals. We call our numerals the Hindu Arabic numerals. And so that's the Hindu numerals don't look like much. I won't give you a hint. I was going to, but if you're interested, you can figure it out. It's pretty cool when you do. Some are similar to ours, but some are not. So how did they evolve? So that really made the mystery more interesting. Where do the numerals come from? Why are they Hindu and why is Arabic? So this sort of tripped a scholar, a British scholar by the name of G.R.K. in the early part of the 20th century, late 1800s, early part of the 20th century, 20s and up to 1931. And he claimed that the numerals, our numerals and the zero, come from the west to India. Or they come from the Arabs. That's his hypothesis. Either the Arabs invented them and took them both east and west because the Arabs were traders, or they were developed in Europe and then they went to India. And he was actually an expert in India, but he was very biased. And the other guy who I mentioned at first, the boring guy, George Sedez, decided to disprove him and to prove that the zero, which is the key numeral in the number system, and all the numerals come from the east and went to the west. So they are an Eastern invention. So I knew excuse me, I knew this story and I tried to trace it. So this was really a dead end. We came home afterwards, and it was before the grant. I thought, well, what do you do with this? I couldn't find early zeros in India. The earliest is from the 9th century, roughly 850, I don't remember, in a place called Gwalior. And what's wrong with that zero, so we're really talking about the zero because the zero is the key to the numerals because it's what allows the numerals to cycle. If you think of the Roman numerals, suppose you want to write any number, I don't know, MMM would be what, 3000, and then CC would be 400, and so on. So each number has to sort of grow that way, you know, 10,000, whatever, 538. You'd write it with just stacking numbers. But our numbers are very efficient. You only use 9 symbols, 9 signs, and a 0. And the reason is, for a Roman to write 20, you'd have to write XX. For us, we could use the 2 and put a 0 after it. So the 0 is an amazing invention. It turns the numerals into, it gives them an algebraic structure that allows them to cycle. So that you can use, I know you write 3000 with the same 3 and 3 zeros after it. So that is an invention that's really extremely important and changed the world. So, like so many other things. So computers work with ones and zeros. So what happened was that I was stuck and I didn't know where to go. You should ignore what you see there. I didn't know where to go, and then I was stuck. And I wrote this grant hoping to go and look for the earliest 0. And then I got sick. Then I decided that I don't like hospitals. They're kind of not very good places. I had the tube removed, and I flew to Thailand. So I flew to Thailand because I like Thailand. It's a great country. It's a lot of fun. This is Wat Po, and I'm sorry, this is Wat Arun. This temple, if you know, it's like a symbol of Thailand. It's under coinage and everything. This is the Chao Phraya River, and well, this is what it looks like from the river. A lot of modern buildings. It's really a nice place to visit. this is what Po, and it has all these Buddhas there. So it's a fun place to visit, and you can see that by the reclining Buddha. Of course, the thieves aren't Thai. So that's why I went there. I went there to look for, okay, so I did spell it, but the accent's missing, and the O and the E are linked together. There's a ligature. So this is the guy's actually a Hungarian Jew who came to France, and he wanted to become, the name was Kadosh, which means holy in Hebrew, and he decided to become more French than the French, and so that's why he wrote it this way, and he made sure that everybody always spelled it not the way I did with the ligature and down. So it's a very French name. And he lived in Bangkok, and I was looking for where he lived, and just sort of following in his footsteps to try to get hints about the zero. The zero that defeated K, the zero that in the 30s proved definitively that the zero came from the east. But I didn't find anything having to do with Sedés, and my wife joined me, and we went to Laos. And the reason we went to Laos is that I was developing a philosophical theory, which is not my area at all, and I shouldn't talk about things I know nothing about. But I became convinced that the zero not only is an Eastern idea, but it comes from the Buddhist void, shunyata. Why I got that idea, I actually tested it on C.K. Raju when he was done with his long monologue about the Indians inventing everything. I said, hold it a minute, do you think that the zero has anything to do with shunyata, the void, the meditation void that's in your mind when you meditate? And he said, of course, and it comes from India, and in India, the word from zero is shunya, which comes from shunyata. So there, he gave me that. That was worth the trip to India for. So it's probably his idea, not mine. But I adopted that idea, and I thought, I'm going to go to Laos, and because this is a place called Luang Prabang. Anybody been there, by the way? Oh, you should go there. It's an amazing place. So you came for a talk about travel, right? Not mathematics. It's a jewel. You can see already the difference between what you see in Thailand, all this intricate detail and everything, and you'll see it in the following slides. Excuse me. So Laos, Luang Prabang has more Buddhist monks per square yard or whatever foot than any place in the world. They're all over. They go and they come for, they keep asking for rice. You have to give them rice. In the morning they come, they ask for rice, and they love to talk to you, and they all want to go to MIT. My wife works at MIT, so that was useful. They all talk to her, not to me, about how can we get into MIT. And then they ask me, well, you know, maybe you can tell us how to get into Stanford and Harvard. So they're very interested in talking. They want to practice their English, and they want to go to the West. But they meditate all the time, and I wanted to convince myself that the zero did come from the idea of a void which doesn't exist or didn't exist in the West and is Eastern because of Buddhism. And there are other aspects of the numerals that they have to come from the East. For example, infinity doesn't come to the West until the 1800s. Well, you know, leaving out discussions of God's infinitude and things like that from Augustine or another philosophizing. But in mathematics, it doesn't really come into the West until very late, the 1800s. While Jainism has a lot about infinity, and so does Hinduism. There's the endless sea and the infinite, the sea turtle. His name is Infinity, and if you know anything about Hinduism, it's all over, the idea of infinity. So I became convinced that infinity and zero, the two ends of the number system, if you will, zero and infinity, are Eastern ideas. So I did talk to a lot of monks, And this is just an excuse to show Luang Prabang. The reason I recommend going there is it's not going to stay that way. They're building a high-speed rail line from China and a new airport, and eventually there'll be a lot of tourism. But right now, if you go there, if you go to one place in the east, it's just amazing. It's just beautiful. Anyway, you can see you can see their Buddhas are different. Luang Prabang it really means a Buddha from a particular kind of Buddha that came from Sri Lanka that was given to the king of Laos as a present. This guy is very interesting. He's not Buddhist. He's a Hindu, and he's not Eastern. He's from France, but he knows a lot. And when you do research like this, at least the way I did it, it's a lot of serendipity and a lot of talking to people. And I wish I had more time to talk to him. He's very mysterious, but as soon as we got a conversation going, all these tourists from all over flocked to him, and I never got to talk to him again until the next day when I ran into him by chance. Just French Hindu who is interested in Buddhism, and he also knows a lot about the philosophy of mathematics and philosophy in general and religions in the East, and just a very interesting person. And at least that's how I do research, just talk to interesting people. And the Mekong goes there, the Mekong River, and you can see a nice sunset. So I'm finally getting somewhere. The oldest zero in history, other than the Maya zero, which is older but didn't become our zero, the Hindu-Arabic system's zero, comes from the Mekong. So there's a place about 200 kilometers that way, and that way is southeast. In Cambodia, there's a place called Sambor on Mekong. In French, it's Sambor sur Mekong, and there are temples there from the 7th century, so 2 centuries earlier than the one in Gwalior, with a zero. And that's a zero that Siddharth found. So the Mekong is very important. So once I finished talking to these monks, and all of them confirmed that my idea, maybe it's a trivial idea, that the zero comes from the void. Of course, they said, yes, when we meditate, we think about the void, and that's zero, and then we start counting, 1, 2, 3. So it's right there. And they all agreed. And then they wanted forms to apply to universities in the West. So I went to Phnom Penh. And I know it looks crazy, but there is some reason in this madness. So I went to Phnom Penh to meet the Deputy Minister of Culture and Fine Arts of Cambodia, because it turned out that he held the key to the mystery. And he's the one who made this grant worthwhile and made me rediscover an artifact that got lost since the Khmer Rouge era. So Siddharth analyzed this stele, this mysterious stele that I'll talk about in a few minutes, and then it disappeared. Nobody knew where it was. So I spent 5 years trying to track it down, not knowing whether it existed anymore, because the Khmer Rouge destroyed a lot of things. So I went to Phnom Penh. We all went, actually, all three of us. This is my daughter, Miriam, my wife, Deborah. All three of us went to Phnom Penh, and I met the Minister of Culture, and he sent us to this great place. So anybody had been there? So this is Angkor Wat, but it's not the temple itself. It's a place called Bayon, which is outside Angkor Wat. You can see a face there? That's he has a name, Jayavarman VII. It's a king that built Angkor. But the period is wrong. It's not the period I'm looking for, and it's far from the Mekong. But I went there for a reason. And that's what you see there. You can see his face is everywhere. It's really haunting in Bayonne. It's outside Angkor Wat. It's one of the interesting things to see there. I don't know if it's a temple or a palace, and it has the face of the king all over the place. So the Khmer Rouge destroyed everything, and they, I guess they're like the Taliban. I still remember before 9/11 when they blew up those 2 Buddha statues in Afghanistan, right? Remember, anybody remembers the huge Buddha statues? They just blew them up because they didn't like them. And the Khmer Rouge did the same thing. They, bore holes in people's skulls while they're alive and torture them in all kinds of ways and blow up pieces of art. It's just the way they are. And they're not Muslim, they're just, I guess they had no religion. They're communists, so cruelty has no boundaries, I guess. And that's what they did to statues. I have a great slide, but I'm sorry you won't see it, where you can actually see a statue that was smashed completely. You can see the signs that it's not erosion or anything like that. But they did cause this is, well, I don't know, this could have been fallen, but there's one particular statue that was shown to us by an expert, and it was clearly smashed with attempt to destroy it completely. So there are lots of these, and they're in a place that's it's close to the public. So the reason I went to Phnom Penh is to get permission and beg and plead this government official to allow me to look in a certain location. And this location is called Angkor Conservation. It's a French organization, everything in Indochina that belonged to the French. So it's called Conservation d'Angkor. And it's close to the public, and it just has researchers doing whatever they want there. And they just keep these things. So they told me there are several sheds there, and we chose the right one. I looked at several of them and we didn't enter them, but then we entered this one, and I thought that nobody knew if it existed, the zero, but it was really just sheer luck. But I thought we'll look here, and we looked for several hours, and there was no promise whatsoever that the stealth still exists, because they destroyed so many things. And they actually, the Khmer Rouge had an interesting history. They were in power 74 to 79 or something like that, in the 70s, or maybe, I forget, in the middle of the 70s. And then Pol Pot went in the jungle, and they sort of went away. But in 1990, they came back, and they came back to this particular location. The reason I showed you Angkor Wat is that's where it is. The Angkor Conservation is by Angkor Wat. It's in a clearing in the jungle. They have some sheds there. Nobody knows where it is. It's not open to the public. It's sort of like a closed area, but because I had this permission to go in there after making millions of phone calls and sending millions of emails and begging and pleading, so I was allowed to search there, and I chose to search in this shed that has thousands of just things like that. And there it is, I found it. So it's called K127, and that it survived, and there are thousands of them there, but first I chose to look randomly, but finally I maybe I had an intuition. I went by a certain row, and then there it was. And here it's two sides. This is the front and this is the back, and it's unusual because it's a red kind of color stone. And here are two views of it. So if you know Old Khmer, you can find the zero. There's a zero here. I'll give you a hint. It's right in the middle of this this picture. Oh, there it is. Okay. So what it says is a saka. It's pronounced saka. It has to have, what do you call it in French? The thing goes under the sea, the sedil or something like that? Yeah? So it has to have so it says a saka year, 605 year began on the 5th day of the waning moon. And I'm sorry, this is not a very good, the next one is very good, but anyway, that's the zero. And now you can see it very clearly. So there's the zero, and this is a zero from 683, and we know it with 100% sureness. Why? There's nothing radiocarbon datable here. It says 605, and we know when the Sakya dynasty began. It began in 78, AD 78. So you add 78 to 605, and the date is right there. So it's 683. So it's 200 years earlier than the one in Gwalior, which is the oldest known zero in India. It's further east in Cambodia, And it's not a circle yet, it's a dot. But if you know Arabic, in Arabic, a 0 is a dot. A circle is a 5, a weird-looking circle, not a... So the origin of the 0, and this was discovered in the 1800s in Sambor on Mekong, in this temple on the Mekong. And Sedesse wrote a key paper about it in 1931. And since then, nobody has found an earlier 0 than this one. A 0, of course, the Maya 0 is older, but this is the 0. Nobody found an earlier 0 than this one that evolved into our 0 and our numerals. So these are sort of prototypes of our numerals too. But having seen the magic square from India, you know that they don't look the same. They evolved into what we have in the West now. And the Arabs have a different form of it because it went with the Arabs, with Arab trade. But this is before Arab trade. That's what's so cool about this one, because in the 9th century you have the Caliphate in Baghdad, you have Arab traders all over connecting East and West, but not in 683. And that's the key important, that's what allowed Sedesse to just smash the theory of K and establish that the 0 came from the east, and it's further east. It's much further east than India. It would take a long time in those days to get from Cambodia. You have to go through Myanmar, I think, and whatever to get into India. So it's even farther. So why do we say India? Well, I like to believe that the 0 may have been invented by Khmer, by Cambodians. But historians of science say no, it has to have come from India. I don't know why it has to have come from India. But it may be because it goes back to Sedesse. Sedesse was so I sort of called him boring, but he's a very serious scholar, and he actually is the guy who really discovered the civilizations of Southeast Asia. He translated 2,000 steles like this one. By the way, it starts with the year Saka 605, began within the 5th day of the waning moon, and then it becomes a list of slaves to be given to a local king by the priests in this temple, and 5 sacks of white rice and 2 pairs of oxen, also to be given as gifts to the king. So it's really a sort of description of something, but it has a date, and the date is dateable, and it has a 0. So that's how we have the earliest 0. So what happened was that it just disappeared. Nobody knew where it was, and I thought it was important to rediscover it so it can go to a museum. So the story would end here, but it didn't. Because I was stupid. There's no other way to describe it. As soon as I found it, my wife took all the pictures here, Deborah, and she took this one and the one of me there. And she was taking the pictures, and there are signs no photography anywhere, but I thought I had permission to enter, maybe we'll take pictures. So I cleared this with the Cambodian government. They didn't say anything. I showed them the pictures. No photography. So that's the last slide. It's just Deborah colored it black. I mean, we moved the color. I think it looks better. It was smashed at the top. So as she's taking these photographs, and I'm just elated because it took me 5 years and it saved me from death, and all these things just converge at one point on finding, and Sedesse and his theory has obsessed me for so many years. Finally found it, and I'm like, wow, what a moment of euphoria. And nobody ever goes there, into the shed. And at that moment, 2 women entered the shed. They're dressed in lab coats and they're speaking Italian. And I speak Italian, and so I heard them speak, and I started talking to them, and I said, this is the oldest 0 in history. And he said, oh, really? Good, we'll take it. And they took it. So the Cambodian government has an agreement with the University of Palermo. They teach them restoration. And this archaeologist's name is Lorella Pellegrino. She's from Palermo, and she said, I will take it to my lab. It weighs a couple of tons. It's a big piece of stone. It's about, well, you saw me next to it. So I'll take it to my lab, and my students will study restoration on it. Does this require restoration? You see the 605, you see everything. Doesn't look like it requires any restoration, but there's nothing I can do. The boss is there, and because I told them that it's important, there are thousands of pieces of stone there. You didn't see it, but there are. This is the second row after the heads, but it goes on and on. They could have taken anything. We came here today to get an item at random and to study it, so thank you for telling us this is so important. We want our students to study on an important piece and pour things on it and drill holes in it and so on. So I got sick again, not too seriously, I'm still here, but I really felt ill, and I was angry at myself. I mean, I shouldn't talk. I guess I was just stupid. Why would you talk? You found this after 5 years looking for it. So she took it to her lab. So I went back to Phnom Penh. I came back to Boston, and then I went back to Phnom Penh. The grant has been exhausted. I paid for it in my own money. We're still paying, for it. Went back to Cambodia just to save it. And I met this guy's name is Hab Tush. He's the Deputy Minister of Culture, and I met him, and I showed him the pictures that Deborah took, and I said, this is the most, you helped me find it. Without you, I wouldn't have found it. I found it. Here are the pictures. It belongs in a museum. It's the oldest zero in history. I checked out the museum. We went to the museum 5 times. I found the place for it. They said, oh, good. Show me. And I showed him a map of the museum. I bought a guide to the museum. I showed him, here, it should be here. This is 7th century, right in this corner. This stuff from Sambor and Mekong there. This is where it belongs. And he said, write me the description of it. So I went back to the hotel and I wrote a nice description, everything. I gave it to him. I emailed it to him. He said, don't worry. Send me an email. Don't worry. It will be in the museum. So this photographs were taken on January 2nd, 2013, 2 years ago. I don't know where the piece is now. I have no idea. But I've been told, don't worry, go to the museum. But I think that it was still in the lab of this woman. I went back to Bangkok, and I talked to an art dealer who I befriended, who was very knowledgeable, who helped me actually find Habtush and some of the other people. And he said, oh, he's French, professeur, it's gone. Don't worry, it's gone. You'll never find it again. It's sold somewhere in the world at auction. It's very important. It's the first zero. Somebody is selling it for millions. Maybe the mafia. She's from Palermo, isn't she? And so I didn't know what to do. I emailed Habtush maybe 20 times. There's no answer. And so I would have said that I don't know where it is. But my sister died 2 months ago. And that changed things, because my sister was the first who kind of sent me to Cambodia. She was obsessed with the Khmer Rouge. And she was a wealthy woman, and she left a lot of money. And so I finally had a good idea. The bad idea to talk to those 2 women was, hopefully, is going to be undone by the good idea. The good idea was to offer the Cambodians that I'll pay for the display. So I emailed Habtush and I said, I just came into some money. My sister was a great admirer of the Cambodian people and interested in the Khmer Rouge atrocities, and I want to commemorate her life and her interest by giving a donation to the museum to move this piece. I got an immediate answer within a day. Cambodia is like when it's AM here, a certain hour, it's there the opposite, PM, the same hour. It's like on the other side of the world. I got an immediate answer, thank you very much, we'll accept your gift. And then I got an email from the Minister of Culture herself, his boss, saying, thank you so much. Don't worry, the piece is coming to the museum. It's in the museum already. Pretty much just give us the money. So I think that's the end of the story, I hope. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer them. Yeah.
How did it go from that dot to the zero that we use?
I don't know. I have no idea. The Arabs have probably, well, if you imagine a map of the world, so yeah, it's very complicated, because this is a dot, There's another 0 in Indonesia that's a year younger than this. Hold on. Year younger than this one, and it's a circle. So there must have been at some point 2 variations, a dot and a circle. The circle, assuming it came with the Arabs to the west, it came with Fibonacci, by the way, we know that, from the Fibonacci sequence, that guy, he brought it to Europe from the Arabs. His father was a trader who traded with North African Arabs, and he learned the numerals and brought them to Europe. And only then, 1204, something like that, the Roman numerals went away. Only then, that late. So the Roman numerals persisted in the West until the 13th century, and it wasn't immediate. This book appeared in 1204 or 1202, I think 1204. It took probably several decades until it became entrenched. So at some point there must have been, and Indonesia is about the same longitude there, you know, a few degrees further. But so if you think a 0, a circle down there in Indonesia, in Palembang in Indonesia, a dot here. We have a circle here in the West, and the Arabs still use a dot. So you can imagine the 2 forms traveling and evolving, and one of them is taken by the West, and the other one is kept by the Arabs. That's my guess. Yeah, you had a question there.
I mean, I kind of too. Are you a mathematician interested in history or historian interested in mathematics?
I'm interested in mathematics more than anything else. I've written, most of my books are about math. I wrote a book called Fermat's Last Theorem, about the theorem. I have a book called Mystery of the Aleph, which is Aleph, it's really about infinity, mathematics of infinity. Mathematics is my religion, but archaeology is sort of a hobby. So this is my first foray into archaeology. And my mathematician friend said, "You'll never find it." But I did find it, so maybe I'm a better archaeologist than mathematician. I don't know.
So your education was?
In math, yeah, in math, right.
Okay.
And statistics.
Did you come across the Babylonian version of 0?
Yeah, the Babylonian used a blank, but it caused confusion. So the example I'd like to give is, they had to assume from the context. So if you said something costs $6.95, if you're talking about a journal, you know, then it's $6.95. But you say it costs $6.95, and you're talking about airplane tickets, then $695. They had to do things like that all day because it didn't have an actual sign to represent 0. They left it blank. So there were confusions about that. But I don't know much about the Babylonian system other than that, or about the Maya for that matter. I've seen Maya numerals, but I've always been obsessed with the Western, Eastern, Hindu-Arabic numerals and where they came from. Not really. The Egyptians had numerals too. About them I know nothing. So I'm really most interested in the numerals. In the 0 itself, the 0 is, well, the 0 is interesting for many other reasons as well. Yeah, hi.
So the whole idea of the compactness of the numbers we use today has to do with the concept of a base.
Right.
We use multiplication as well as addition, whereas the Roman numerals just use addition.
Right.
And apparently if the Babylonians already had that concept, but they didn't have the 0.
Right. Yeah. So the 0 is really what did it. Yeah. But so we actually, the Babylonian system did actually reach us too. We have 60 minutes in an hour and 60 seconds in a minute. That's Babylonian. And the circle has 360, which is 6 times 6. There's several other things, if I remember, that come from the Babylonian numbers. So, and they use base 60, you're right. So the other problem with the Babylonian system is the base is very large. It's 60, while our base is 10. And there's some theories about that. I forget who it is. I'll remember his name as soon as.
Charles C.
No, there is a scholar who lived in the first part of the 20th century. They had a very interesting theory about. He was Austrian American, who had the theory why the base is 60, and he said that because it has many divisors, like 2 and 3 and 20 and 10 and so on, so that they wanted as many divisors as possible. 10 is only 2 and 5. So it seems to me a good theory as to why it's base 60. But the base 60 makes things complicated. So if you want to do something in Babylonian arithmetic, suppose you want to write something. Oh, it's messy. You need a board. So you have the units, and then you have powers of 60. So the 0 power of 60 are the units. The first power of 60 are the 60, how many 60s there are. And then 60 squared, the same as ours, right? You have the powers of 10 and 100 and so on. They're all powers of 10. 10 to the 0 are the units, 10 to the 1 are the tens, 10 to the second power are the hundreds, and so on. So with the Babylonian system, you do exactly the same. The units are the powers 0 power of 60. The 1 power of 60 is how many 60s there are. And what's 60 square 3600? So the next one, the next power is 3600, analogous to our 100. So it's just a very big, cumbersome system, beside the fact that they have no zeros. There's also that, but they did have, you're right, that power base of the number system. But of course, the base doesn't matter. Computers use base too, so, which is probably the most logical. You could do a current is one direction or another, or there is a capacitor has a charge or doesn't, or a bit is well, it's just zeros and one, yes and no. So it's a Boolean kind of system. If we ever meet another civilization, maybe they have three 3 fingers and 3 toes, and they will have developed a number system based on 6 instead of 10. So I think that the base 10 is pretty much arbitrary. The French at some point decided, I think it was after the revolution, tried to when they designed the metric system, they chose 10. But, we had base 10 anyway, but there were arguments in the French Academy of Sciences on what base to use for the numbers. And the discussions went on for hours and days, and the guy who headed the committee decided to break the fighting. And he said, let's use base 11, because it's a nice prime. And so, of course, they all became rational and decided on 10, because 10 was already in use. Yeah.
If you allow me for a moment to stray from the mathematics and go back to the shunyata.
Okay.
The idea of shunyata was very profound in the evolution of religion, because most religions were based on the number 2, the dualism of good and bad. And then there's an enormous breakthrough, the idea of one. That we are all one. There's the oneness of everything. And it was the early Buddhists, who introduced the idea of shunyata, the zero, that the origin of all things arrives out of nothingness. And there's an interesting little side story when a Tibetan sort of hippie monk goes to India to learn about the scriptures, and comes back and sits in front of a university and recounts what he has learned, and he talks about the zero, just to strangers coming by. And he's sitting below, and his name is Talopa, and he's sitting below the window of the university president, whose name is Naropa. And Naropa is at first distracted and annoyed by this fellow talking in front of his window, and then he starts listening to him. And then at a certain point, when Talopa is talking about the idea of shunyata, about the idea of zero, Naropa has this breakthrough, says, this is really important. So he resigns as president of the university and asks sort of this hippie street man to become his disciple, and follows, Naropa follows Talopa through many adventures. But it's interesting that the same fascination that you had with zero, was the point at which the university president thought that the hippie street man had more insight into life than he had.
Well, nice story.
It's around that same period. It's, I don't know the dates exactly, but it is
7th century?
700s.
Oh, wow. Nice story. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments or stories? Yeah.
In Judaism, there is the Kabbalah. I don't know if you know what it is.
Yes, of course.
And the zero and infinity have a big
Right.
role in that.
Right. My book, Mystery of the Aleph, is about the relationship between Kabbalah and infinity in the mathematical sense. But I didn't get into zero there, only in infinity. Georg Cantor, who was a German mathematician of Danish and Russian roots, chose the Hebrew letter Aleph to stand for infinity, and in Kabbalah, Aleph stands for God and infinity, because it's the first letter for the Hebrew two words, really. Ein Sof. Ein means no, and Sof means end. So no end is infinity. So my theory was that that he sort of knew about Kabbalah, and that's why he chose the Aleph, because he didn't choose the Greek alpha as everybody else does in mathematics or in physics, or I don't know, some Indian letter. Or by the way, the Indian letters are so thank you. The Indian letters are very interesting. When I was in India, I was still interested in the numerals as a whole, and we went to a museum, and there are some scholars who are working there. And they told me that their numerals and their letters come from Aramaic. So maybe the Kabbalah, which is Hebrew and comes, actually the text in Aramaic, right? The text of the original text of is in Aramaic.
Zohar.
The Zohar, right, the Zohar. So maybe there's the same root there. If Aramaic was. Does anybody know about Aramaic and
And at that time, there were Jews that were going to the east.
Right. No, they came later. They came during the I don't know.
Before. The 10 tribes is about...
the 10 tribes. Because in the 1500s, I think Jews go to Goa when it's the Portuguese. Before that.
Before the time of Christ.
From the first... the
10 tribes were going to the east. The Far East.
So maybe everything is related. Good.
Comment on the infinity you mentioned. I
Right.
think the infinity concept was BC, not as late as you mentioned. If we take Achilles and the turtle.
No, I wasn't. I'm sorry if I implied that the infinity comes. No, I'm very sorry. I was talking about zero. The zero, this particular zero. By the way, this may not be the earliest zero. That's the earliest we know. If you know about estimation in statistics, when you estimate the bottom of a distribution, you never can get to it. You always estimate something higher. I've done actually a study on that. So we have a sample point. It's called an order statistics, the smallest order statistic. This zero is the smallest order statistic we have. Maybe there's an earlier zero, and earlier. For all we know, maybe the zero comes from the first centuries BC. We don't know. The oldest zero ever found so far. Yes, but the infinity is much earlier, of course. I'm sorry if I gave that false impression. The infinity is a much earlier concept philosophically. Mathematically, it was really only understood by Cantor. Nobody understood infinity. The best example is a Cantor. They all have these enemies like K and Sedis. Cantor had this enemy, Kronecker, who was actually a good mathematician. Kronecker, I'm not telling you anything new, it was famous for saying God made the integers and all the rest is made by man, or it was a work of man. So numbers like pi don't exist. It has an infinite, non-repeating decimal expansion. He didn't believe in that. So Cantor was really the first person to really understand infinity well, and know that there are several levels of infinity. There's a level of infinity, what he called Aleph zero, which is the countable numbers. Say they're infinite, but you have to count them. You know, they're pedestrian infinite. 1, 2, 3, 4, go to infinity. And he proved that the The rational numbers, meaning fractions, are also the same order of infinity. You think there'd be much more, but they're not. By the diagonal proof, I don't know if any of you know about that. So he wrote a matrix, an infinite matrix going this way and that way, and kind of weave this one-to-one correspondence like a snake. 1 goes with the 1 over 1, 2 goes with 2 over 1, 3 goes with 1 over 2, and so on. So he weaves all the rational numbers, and he can count them against all the integers, showing they're the same size. But he actually was able to prove that the irrational numbers, the real numbers, have a higher order of infinity, meaning you can never find, there does not exist a one-to-one correspondence between the integers and the real numbers, meaning numbers including pi and e and phi and things like that, you know, the golden section, things like that, irrational numbers. But if you like that sort of stuff, you can actually prove that the algebraic numbers, meaning numbers like square root of 2, are still countable, and that's a really cool thing in mathematics. Anyway.
And was that theory of infinite the most recent person you said? I missed the name.
The name?
Yeah.
Cantor, you mean? Or
Yeah, and what year?
Georg Cantor, 1850 something he started, and he died in 1918 in an insane asylum in Halle in Germany. I went there and I saw his room and the bathtub in which they immersed him, because he went crazy. Maybe because of thinking about infinity and because of being harassed by Kronecker and other people. And he was bipolar, is what we think today. And what they did in the 1800s, late 1800s, is they would immerse him in a bathtub until he wasn't depressed anymore. That was when I went there. I met a psychiatrist who was very interested in Cantor. He was treating people in the same institution today. Cantor died there in 1918 during the First World War, and he was just fascinated with this guy who had discovered infinity and understood what infinity is and could actually show the levels of infinity. And he found all kinds of documents about his hospitalizations and gave me. Yeah.
So what about Newton's use of infinity to kind of prove calculus?
Yeah, that's very. The fluxions are not. So today we use limits. You know, limit is something goes to infinity. That's a pedestrian infinity. What I call the countable infinity. Limit is n goes to infinity. N goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. We take limits that way. We have index sets that have a higher cardinality. You can call it index set I, which would be indexed by the real numbers. Look under. Go online or get a book on non-standard analysis, and you have the answer to all everything you want to know about fluxions and about the limits in these things. Abraham Robinson in the 20th century sort of developed a new theory of calculus called non-standard analysis, where he actually claims that our use of infinity and limits in the calculus is not correct, and he does calculus in a totally different way. It's very fascinating. Anything else? Well, thanks so much for coming.